Hey guys, Prodigious J coming at you live from the largest Sith temple in history, better known as the Respawn Point headquarters, which that could also be known as my apartment, but why ruin the odd mystery for you guys? Today I want to bring you guys into the world of necromorphs, engineers, and somehow a love story. That's right, I want to talk to you fine gamers about none other than Dead Space 3. So, shall we get started? In the past few months, we have had a slew of games come down the pipeline to excite and amaze us. We've had Far Cry 3, The Walking Dead, one of my personal favorites, and DMC Devil May Cry. One of these games that graced our consoles was Dead Space 3 from EA and Visceral Games. Now, Dead Space 3 obviously is the third installment of the Dead Space series, which started back in 2008 on the PS3, Xbox 360, and PC. The series was born with an air of fear and thrills on board, a tiny, confined space vessel. Such a space being centered in the middle of the vast emptiness also known as space. So much space, yet not enough room for my game collection. At its heart, Dead Space was a survival horror game, the likes we hadn't seen since the original Resident Evil, without the horrid camera angles. We were put in the boots of silent but deadly Isaac Clarke, a ship engineer who was part of the distress team to arrive on the vessel that held what would start the horror that would haunt you, Isaac, and humanity for several years to come. With the creepy atmosphere, grotesque enemies, and a mind trip of a story, Dead Space had a lot going for it. That was until Dead Space 2 and 3 came along and slowly but surely changed the dynamic and style of the game. That's enough about the past, though. You guys came here for a reason, so without waiting any longer, I give you my personal thoughts on Dead Space 3. As mentioned, Dead Space had plenty of atmosphere and thrills to classify it as a survival horror game, and actually get away with it. The formula worked for the first installment, at least, but as mentioned, it was modified within the next two installments. So much so, the horror atmosphere all but vanished. Our silent protagonist, Clark, who took up vocal lessons in Dead Space 2, it seems, comes back to us with so much dialogue filled with enough angst that the writers of Dawson's Creek would be jealous. From the start, Isaac finds himself being held at gunpoint and told it was once again time to save the universe from the undead forces. Being forced back into action, Isaac must stave off the cultist group who worship the markers created by the undead necromorphs, as well as the big bad beasties themselves. The action element is strong in this game. The gameplay is centered around shootouts against the reanimated creatures that focus more on mayhem more than the fear factor. In fact, that is mainly all this game is. There are many puzzles to access, which I'll get into later, but it isn't enough to really break up the segments. Dead Space 3 isn't anything groundbreaking in terms of gameplay, which isn't a bad thing, but when your franchise has already established a style for itself and suddenly you remove that one aspect that really made the game feel good, you lose some points in my book. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy the action sequences, true, there were moments that were very taxing on my patience, but that was more inside confined spaces. There is a measure of strategy needed to fend off the hordes of aliens, which is where the new customized weapon feature, a craft/mineral system, comes into play. As you progress through the game, you will find toolkits, scavenger drones, and all sorts of other items that will accumulate resources, such as tungsten or ration stamps, which will allow you not only to craft items like tungsten bars, which will allow you to access bonus lock rooms, or small to large medkits, but it also allow you to create and build your own weapons of mass destruction. The customization menus are simple and easy to use. Just pick a base, attach engines, each with their individual powers, tips that will affect the way the shots are produced, and the coup de grace, the enhancement chips. These chips that have added bonuses and some hindrances, such as +1 rate of fire, +2 reload, or +3 damage -1 rate of fire. I mean, you can pretty much just soup up your weapon to make a master weapon. This is a gift and a curse, though. Unfortunately, it's a flaw within the game design, giving you an edge in those tough situations, but sadly, making even the hardest difficulty settings moderately easy. It becomes a game breaker. Sure, the player can decide to switch weapons for variety and challenge, but let's be honest. In a game like this, you'll probably take the breaker in the face of incredibly difficult situations. Moving on to graphics. This game is absolutely breathtaking. Looking back at all the environments, Dead Space 3 truly surprised me in terms of graphical depth and style. While many levels are inside industrial buildings or science labs, even these have their own beauty or charm to it. The scenes outside on the planet's surface or in the vacuum of space make any living spectacle pale in comparison. I was very impressed with the work done here, and I have to say the game was definitely stepped up in this department, as the original Dead Space teams started off on a lower engine and finally hit the top. Kudos, Visceral. Kudos to you. Going along with this, the character models look lifelike, and it feels as if they have a life of their own, which has been something that has been constantly present in the series, and it is such a relief to see it continue. Even the lip sync is spot on for characters, giving us the immersion we all crave from a game. I would comment on just how disfigured and grotesque the necromorphs are, but that would take up an entirely new paragraph. And would you really want to sit here all day listening to how perfect they fit the role they are destined to play? Sound, however, is a double edged sword, in comparison to my graphical judgment anyway. While the music is both sophisticated and frightening, the voice acting and background sounds feel a bit phoned in. Sure, the actors get the emotions across. Sadly, this game just feels like the vocals are either shouting or at a dead calm, which in Dead Space feels rather out of place. Would you be calm in the face of a reanimated monster from 200 years ago with spear-like tendrils? I sure as hell wouldn't be. Yelling makes sense, sure, but why no in between? No fear, no terror, only anger or calm. I believe my buddy, the portly gentleman, hit on this as well in another blog he wrote. I'll leave a link down in the description. Definitely want you to check that out, and shout out to him. I can't help but feel, though, that the direction of the script was sorely lost. I hope I'm not coming across as biased, but Isaac would have worked out better as a silent protagonist in my own opinion. Now, the musical score, however, works well throughout the game, mixing in methodic sounds of something moving in the background or tense segments in which your life is being risked by something other than living corpses. The style fits the gameplay pretty well, getting the player tensed, thinking any moment could be their last. However, this effect feels too played up at times, losing the effect desired and quickly making you feel like you shouldn't heed the warning, as nothing has happened the past 3 or 4 times of hearing it. Definitely a balance is needed in this department. If you're going to sit here and play through the game and then try to hype up one moment so it actually terrifies you and yet have nothing happen, are you seriously going to be immersed in that game? Now it's time to get down to the nitty gritty, the down and dirty, in my section people love to hate. The cons. The game features something new for the Dead Space universe. Co-op campaign. Sure, everybody's been jumping on that bandwagon lately, but you never know, it could actually work out in a title one of these days. This is not that title. I say that with a grain of salt. I haven't gotten to play it with a co-op partner. However, I have realized that it is very limiting to people who are not. There are even co-op only missions that have extra resources and a background story for one character that unfortunately you can't access without a partner. Now, that would be all fine and dandy if it didn't try to tie in with the main story, but as you reach the end, it makes you feel like something that was spoken or done within those co-op missions is just thrown out there for the single player to hear, which leaves you kind of confused when you're standing at the end. Moving on. When mentioned gameplay earlier, I talked about how the style used to be horror survival. Well, this and in most of the second, the genre switched to just action shooter. Sure, it does the style proud with hordes of enemies and great weapon customization, but within the change lies the problem. The original model was based upon fear, and while the gameplay has moved away from that, the story hasn't, and neither has the musical styling. The entire game just seems to want you to think there's fear just around every corner, and if you're not careful, you'll jump out of your chair in fear. That is truly not the case. The fear, as much as Visceral wanted it to, doesn't exist. It is very hard to find in Dead Space, and only manages a jump scare here and there. Can't help but wonder if Visceral Games really hadn't clued in on the loss of horror and terror. To controls, the controls have been changed in a few ways. One of the most notable being the slow response rate of stasis. Stasis, for those of you new to the series, allows you to freeze moving objects or enemies so that you may move safely past or give you some extra time to reload. In the previous installment, stasis was an instant shot, 1 second delay, even if that, and enemies or objects were frozen. In Dead Space 3, however, it takes longer to launch, especially when you are in dead center of a mob of Necros looking to devour you. In situations like that, it does make a game tense. It makes you feel like you cannot survive even if you were given the opportunity. The situation honestly had occurred to me so many times when I played. I was left to the masses and instantly and constantly greeted by the bloody game over screen. The response time delay introduced in this game really left a sour taste in my mouth, if you cannot tell. Another thing that really just threw me off about Dead Space 3 was the puzzles that morphed into like mini-games. You're probably asking yourself, mini-games in Dead Space? Now I know you're full of it. Not so fast, my doubting viewers. Dead Space 3 does indeed have mini-games. Who could forget that classic Match the Shape challenge with cargo containers? Or better yet, the always loved timed highlight the node scenes, the most popular known game where your controller becomes a gateway for misdirectional presses and frustration. The minigame/puzzles in this title just feel out of place and unnecessary. If there ever was anything specific that I could credit for the break of immersion and fear, it would be these oh-so-special sections of Dead Space 3. Maybe in the next installment we can do a Mario Party segment. Wouldn't that be fun? One of the biggest things I was truly disappointed by, though, was a factor in gaming that has always irritated me. Luck. That's right, I said it. This game thrives off the gamer being overly lucky enough to survive certain moments. As a staple, I'm a gamer who plays on the hardest difficulty setting. I need to get my thrill from the get-go. I want to make sure that I'm playing on the hardest difficulty possible. I ventured forth to do the same with Dead Space 3, and my results, you may ask? I'm sad to admit I had to turn down the difficulty a notch or more because many moments I would find myself being mowed down in the most frustrating situations. Even with the most powerful weapon I could muster, I could not survive against the speed of the creatures, the sheer limit to space, or the never-ending waves of Necros. I almost rage quit several times, which is a surprise for me because I have never done that. Eventually, due to my lack of luck to this situation, I soon turned the difficulty down all the way, so I could finally enjoy the game. Luck should never be something that is required for a game, higher difficulty or not. Dead Space 3 is no exception. It completely ruined the immersion and just made me angry rather than driven to find new ways around the nigh impossible situation. You can call me a quitter, but I went 14 out of 19 chapters on impossible difficulty before rage level dropping, so I have credibility. In the end, I enjoyed this game. Being honest, the enjoyment wasn't as powerful or as great as it was back when Dead Space 1 was released, but it was definitely there. Dead Space 3 is a game with an identity crisis, which if it found the time to sort through its thoughts and feelings, it would soon discover a great action-adventure game. Pros. Graphics are spectacular, breathtaking in every way. The action gameplay is well put together, teamed up with gun creation. Musical scores make the game very deep and engaging. The oh-so-pleasant cons. Identity confusion. Thinks it's fear-based game, but has left the genre in general. The controls, stasis in general, slow down, creating too many problems. Luck required to play. Seriously? I need to visit the shop for this one. My scores in the end: personal, 7 out of 10. Technical, 6 out of 10. Overall, 6.5 out of 10. I know many people are going to disagree with me and hate me for rating it so low, but I can't help but feel this installment was lacking in many areas. Even if it shined so brightly, it blinded me in others. It had a lot of potential, but a lot of it got wasted on the game trying to decide who it really was. Alright guys, this was my review of Dead Space 3. As normal, please like, comment, and subscribe, and check out the links below for my Twitter pages, Facebook, and also blog. Also check out Lucas, the Portly Gentleman's blog. He mentions about his feel of immersion with characters and silent protagonists. Also, I still have the Aliens Colonial Marines giveaway going on. I'll put that video link in the bottom down here as well. Click on that, leave your comment. I will be doing a drawing as of next Friday. I will be giving away 3 items: the facehugger, the poster, and the wristband. If you want to win, just go to the video, follow the instructions, get your friends in on it, like, comment, subscribe. Prodigious J, signing out.